Professional novice.
That's right. Yes. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to Professional Novice. And this is a podcast that my name's Ali Rizvi. I started this podcast in these COVID times while we're all kind of staying at home. And the whole idea was to bring on people who have certain professions, they're experts, and talk to them about something sort of beyond their expertise. So a lot of that just includes me bringing on my friends and finding a good excuse to talk to them and just to sort of shoot the shit with them. And but I happen to have a lot of really cool and really fun, interesting, knowledgeable friends who are a lot smarter than me. So I think this is going to be fun. And we're starting off on such a lighthearted topic today. Well, our first guest today is we're talking to with Dr. Simi Rahman. So Simi, welcome to Professional Novice.
Thank you so much, Ali. I'm so happy you said that. Friends that are more intelligent than you have been trying to prove that right for 25 years.
Yeah, it's fine. Oh, I was going to say it's fine. We get to meet you for the first time, but okay, that's not going to work. So full disclosure, so Simi and I have been friends for about 30 years. Full disclosure, we also dated 25 years ago. So Simi, you were my first girlfriend, and was I your first boyfriend too, ever?
No.
I was 17. Oh, I wasn't? But I was your first real relationship?
Yes.
First real? Oh, my condolences. I'm really, really sorry. I apologize. It must have been terrible for you.
I'm so glad we just cleared that up. That's been really weighing on me.
Yeah. Anyway, so we broke up 25 years ago, and we've been like brother and sister ever since.
Yeah. Really, and I love your family. I mean, part of my best med school experiences was going and visiting your family and getting to know your brothers and sisters. And honestly, thank you for sharing your family with me.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't talk to them anymore. Like I'm just.
I do. It's fine. They're fine.
The social distancing is a great excuse. No, I'm kidding. I love my family. I love all of them. They're fantastic. So, so Simi and I went to med school together. I ended up becoming a pathologist. So, what do pathologists do? We do tissue diagnosis. I'm an oncologic pathologist, which means I do cancer diagnosis. And Simi ended up becoming a pediatrician. So another thing I did as a pathologist was I did lots and lots of autopsies. I used to conduct autopsies, and that's we're going to talk more about that in this conversation. And Simi is a pediatrician. She's in California. She works at a large Los Angeles hospital, living it up on the West Coast. I think the weather there is a little nicer than this. Actually, it's gotten nicer here in Canada as well. So.
It was 80 degrees. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Right. So, since we talked about, I don't really have a segue to go into the topic we're saying, but I'm saying, well, you've known me for 30 years. So I guess that's kind of.
Well, we met. Yeah, that's a good segue. And we met over our first cadaver, right?
We did.
Anatomy class.
Yes. So we met after the initial orientation speech that happened. We were this is a story. Our sort of roll numbers in our class were together because Simi's last name is Rahman and my last name is Rizvi. So alphabetically, fate just kind of put us together, and that also meant that
all that was happening. It was all there.
Yeah. So in all of our lab groups, the groups that we were in, we were together in our anatomy lab, which was, I think, my first direct physical interaction with a dead body, with a cadaver.
For sure, mine too. And we were both 17, so let's remember that as well.
Yes,
we were both 17. We were very young and had no idea what to expect, or I don't know that we were given very much preparation. Like nowadays in med schools here, there's like a ceremony that happens. You honor the body and the person who donated the body. We didn't really have a lot of construct around how to deal with the emotional experience.
Yeah, and
looking back.
And the way that they got the bodies there wasn't really through donations. They would find because in Pakistan, a lot of people die unidentified. Nobody claims them. They die on the streets or somewhere. So they kind of bring them in. That time they used to do that. I feel like, I don't know if they still do, probably. But I remember the face and the head, when we first started, they had wrapped up in a cloth, so we didn't know what this person looked like.
Yeah.
All we knew was when we initially did, I think we started with the upper limb, and we dissected that. And later on, when we went to the head and neck, which is much later in the year, that's when they first revealed the face.
Yeah, and I'll never forget that feeling of like touching a dead body. You know, it's not like touching another animal that's died. It's a human, so there's a multiple things going on. It's like, oh, when I die, I'll feel this way too, or oh, it's cold, or there's just sensations that happen, and I think they're always indelible. But I do remember we named him.
Do you remember what we named him? Yeah, they always said we're such. Oh, we did. We named him Allah the Tabirzada. That was probably me because I remember I came up with that. Okay.
Yeah. That was your thing.
I'm a psychopath, so that worked. And
we were 17 as my defense, honestly.
Yeah. So for those people wondering what we were doing in medical school when we were 17, we're not geniuses. Well, Simi is. I'm not.
No.
But the
published author, I'm not.
Yeah, but in that part of the world, in Pakistan, you go to medical school right after high school.
Yeah.
And then after you finish medical school, we did the same licensing exams that they do here, in the US. Then, we specialized, and we eventually ended up specializing and subspecializing here in the United States. Right.
So, yeah. And residency and all of that. So my work also involves working in an ICU because I'm a hospitalist. So we do see a lot of traumas. And in that situation, I've been around children dying and the parental experience around it. And I know you have mentioned that there was some experience like that you had very early on. I think you mentioned in your book.
I did. So my first experience, so we'll talk about the personal experiences that we had, but my first experience seeing a death in front of me was my cousin, who was 3 years old, and she died of leukemia, like acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which at that time now the cure rate is amazing, right? It's in the high 80s, 90s, whereas at that time it wasn't. So she died of it, and I was 5 years old. She was 2 years younger than me. So, usually that's around the first time you sort of create memories and things start making sense to you. And so that's the first time I saw it. That was my first personal experience with it. And, even though I saw that and I grew up, it's weird because I'm a father now of a 3.5-year-old girl. The first death, I think you remember when I came and told you about it, when we started our clinical rotations, was a 10-year-old kid who I was resuscitating, or I was on the team that were resuscitating him. And eventually, the attending told me to pull out the tube at the end when, they realized the kid was brain dead. So I had to extubate him. And, his family was there, and it was just a really jarring thing that stays with you the first time it happens. And with the kids, I later autopsied. I did pediatric pathology as well during residency, as everybody does. And we did autopsies on children. So, we used to get the fetuses and everything that were that died in utero or whatever. That was sort of common. A lot of those were early enough that they ended up being surgical specimens. But the autopsies, there was a cutoff after which they would become autopsy specimens. So with lots of newborns, a 4-year-old child who had MRSA, which is methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. For people who don't know, it's a very sort of it's a terrible strain of bacteria that's resistant to pretty much most antibiotics, except for
they died of sepsis probably.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was and it was weird because it wasn't just seeing the death. I had we had gowns and we had gloves on, and we would be cutting into these kids and putting our hands in and taking out organs and weighing them. And so that was the work. And you eventually got used to doing that on adults. Like everybody's seen it on TV, right? With all the forensic shows. So, with adults, you kind of get desensitized. You walk in, you're listening to music and just, talking to everybody else on the team, and it becomes normal. But with kids, I don't think I've ever gotten desensitized to that. Like, I'll never forget the 4-year-old.
You've said that to me before. What is it, do you think?
With children,
like, now if you think about it.
It feels like it's against the laws of the universe. It just feels like it just shouldn't happen. It feels completely unnatural. And it feels wrong. There's, it just, I mean, it should too, even if you have someone who's 23, 24 or something, but it just doesn't feel that bad. There's a certain innocence to it. And I wonder sometimes whether, I used to think, I'm like, do I feel worse about this because this kid didn't do anything to deserve this and didn't get a chance at life? But then I think, I'm like, well, what did the 24-year-old do to deserve it? You know, it's not like anybody's innocence.
We don't accumulate reasons to die.
Yeah, you don't. But
well, here's an interesting fact about childhood death, right? Childhood mortality was much higher before the onset of antibiotics, even to the extent where in our cultures, we don't actually name children. Have you noticed this? When we came to America and we're asked, oh, what's your child's name at birth? And we put it down. The people back home are like, you're already naming the child? That's bad. That's bad luck. And I think the whole Charlie's Din and all of that was a ritualization and acknowledgement that kids die. Children die of sepsis all the time, right?
Yeah.
A lot of mothers and children don't make it past childbirth, and the first 30 days, which we know are the most like vulnerable. You get a fever, you get sepsis, you don't have an immune system as a baby, right? And I do believe that there were beliefs around this that kept people from attaching. And I wonder if it has something to do with that attachment, right? Like with children, the way adults attach is like, oh, I'm supposed to take care of you. And when some harm comes to them, it feels much deeper, like parents of children who die, I don't believe they ever get over it. I really don't. You can't, right? Like you've got a child now. If anything ever happened to your child, that child doesn't die for you, like you have them being 5 years old, you have them being 10 years old. Those memories don't go away, right? You always carry that.
They never go away. It's especially now, I guess it gives you a different perspective when you have your own kid. And so I had a dream. This is really, it was pretty funny. There's so I had a dream that, so my dad died, I think, in 2001. And
I remember.
So sometimes, I have dreams, and you knew my dad. So,
and I remember we talked about it. I was in New York at the time. I remember you called me.
Yeah. And and so sometimes I have these dreams. And actually, my dreams, for some reason, he's always alive, which is also a really weird thing. He's always there. It's an alternate reality. But this one time I had a dream where he was actually alive. This was just a couple of weeks ago. He was alive. He'd sort of come back, and we were in an alternate reality where he never died. And he's like, "Hey, look, I'm here." And I'm like, "Oh, that's great." And I was happy for about a minute. And then I thought, I was like, I was looking for my daughter. I was, where is she? Right. And I couldn't find her. And it turned out she never existed. And because he was alive, the trajectory of my life had turned out differently. And I'd never really met Alishpa, it was the mother of my daughter. And I had never, it just, nothing ever happened. So
that particular being didn't happen.
Yeah, but I still knew, I still had all the experiences. And now I was devastated, and I was thinking, oh my God, now I have to make this happen. So I went and I found Alishpa, and she was a complete asshole in the dream for some reason. She's just looking, she's like, what do I want with you? Why do you want me? Like, listen, we have to mate. We have to actually produce a child. That's it. You don't have to do anything with me. I don't even want to deal with you, but we have to. And she's like, ew, go away. What are you talking about? And
this is part of the conversation where I wonder where you are in your dream.
And I was one, so she wasn't happy about the dream, but the whole thing was, I told her about it. She was, and I was just devastated. It's like I lost, and then I got really mad at my dad, and I'm like, what is this? Like, I spent all this time, I was over it, everything's good. Like, why did you have to? Now my whole life is destroyed. I don't have my daughter anymore.
This is why we can't have multiple universes. Do you understand this?
I don't
this is why we cannot have a life after death.
Yeah,
because
we
we
can't.
cannot have awareness of it. Because anytime we have an awareness of it, we're going to start doing shit like that. Having these
Yeah.
dreams are like, well, no, I want this. I want my big house.
So we're coming. Yeah, we are actually we're going to get into that. We had some questions about life after death. Anwar is here, another one of our classmates. Hello, Anwar. How's it going? And Stony is saying secular jihadists help me come out as ex-Muslim. That's amazing. Secular jihadists is the other podcast that I do, with Armin Navabi. So that's still ongoing, by the way. This is just in addition to that. Thank you. And we're actually going to talk about that because both Simi and I grew up Muslim. So we grew up religious, and both of us eventually left it, and we're both atheists now too. And that kind of puts an interesting spin on this whole topic as well.
Yeah, I mean, we both, I think, talked about it at the same time, right? Our conversations were mostly about like, why do people think the way they do? Like, what is life after death like? I think just thinking through those ideas, and getting to the place of understanding why humanity came up with certain ideas, right? And why we need to think of life after death as something that's tangible, because otherwise somehow our lives now become meaningless. I mean, we went through that whole process together, and I right, like our journeys kind of like came to the ex-Muslim place together. So yeah, maybe you start there. It's like, what's that like?
For me, it changes everything, because I think the biggest function of religion and the hardest thing to let go was this idea that, after my father died, and I want to ask you about this too, because I know you lost your father very recently, right? I think
last year.
Last year. So after he died, I wanted that comfort of, that will I ever see him again? Will I meet him again?
Because you were not yet an atheist, or were you questioning at the time?
I had been in and out, so I'd say I was probably agnostic. I was probably more of I used to think that there could be a personal God out there. Sometimes I felt like there was, sometimes I didn't. Depended on my mood, but I wasn't really. I think I was kind of pretty solidly out of the religious part of it, the books and the scriptures, and don't eat this and don't have sex with this person, all that stuff. But yeah, I was still kind of, I felt like there was something bigger than us out there who was watching, who was personally involved. And I used to, but when my dad died, I realized that I probably didn't believe that, which is why it was such a problem. Like, it's probably not going to happen. I'm here sitting, I'm telling myself this shit, and I'm lying to myself. Is it really going to happen or not? And then,
what you mean happen, like the life after death?
Yeah, like, am I ever going to meet him again? Is he going to be? People, when their parents die, they say, "Well, we're going to meet them in heaven. They're going to be waiting there for us, and then they're going to welcome us with open arms and everything." And, then when that happened, it didn't. I just didn't believe it. And you can't force yourself to believe something, even if you want to. I think that's one of the biggest things I learned, that if there is something that convinces you and you believe it, you can't force that. Even there's people who really, really want to believe, but they just can't. You can't make yourself believe something cognitively if it's not convincing. So, but I had an uncle, my mom's oldest brother, who was an atheist, right? And he was like a very militant atheist, the kind of guy who would just come in and troll everybody because he was the oldest. And, you have that, the oldest person gets respect, so nobody could say anything to him. Everybody else.
I see where you modeled your your family dynamics after. Okay.
Yeah, so he visited us from Montreal after my dad died, and he was talking to me and Zamir, my youngest brother, who also took it really hard. I was 25 and Zamir was, I think, 19. And we were talking about these sort of existential questions, and does anything exist afterwards? And he was trolling all of my religious relatives who were sitting there. They were sort of reading the Quran. They're like, okay, you have to say this durood 100 times and repeat this 103 times. And everybody was kind of listening. He's like, what are you guys doing? Do you think he's God that stupid? Do you think he didn't hear you the first time? You have to say this shit like 103 times out in the air. And he was just being openly blasphemous, and nobody could say anything to him because he was in his 70s, and making fun of everybody while they prayed and all of that. So
what was your dad's religiosity? Like, what was that piece like?
My dad was he was religious. He was a believer.
And he passed away a believer? He died a believer?
Yeah, I remember. I didn't ask him about it too much. I asked him once what he thought of it. I was like, why do you because he used to pray. He used to do namaz like 5 times a day. He used to do it at least, I think he used to do it 2 or 3 times a day on most days. Yeah. And then he said, well, I don't know. I don't know if there is or not. I don't know if Islam's the right thing. I don't know which religion's the right one. So he had that intellectual process. But he said, as far as my connection, since I was a little kid, I was taught how to pray. So it's the only way I know to communicate. So it's not about this prayer specifically.
Yeah.
But this is all I know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other piece of it, right? It's just that just because you stop believing in Islam doesn't mean that your quest for a spiritual life goes away. It just becomes your own. And those beliefs, right? Those beliefs that were received, all of a sudden we question them, but that doesn't mean that we don't have beliefs. It's just, I think the conflict arises when we're ex-Muslim and don't really have a very public understand, like we don't have a way of communicating. Like my kids don't know what I believe about death unless I tell them, right?
Yeah.
If I were to be sick and die tomorrow, they would not have any understanding of like, okay, what does she really think about it? So it is not something we really talk about, and that becomes problematic. But also, how do you respect your relatives' Muslim beliefs while still holding your ex-Muslim beliefs, right? Like that was my conflict there. So what ended up happening with your uncle?
Oh, well, I mean, this is one thing I think we should talk about it, because I feel like this is something that the secular community, the atheist, agnostic people, kind of the rational world has skipped, even though it's a very big part of why people are religious. In my case, it was probably one of the only reasons why I clung on to it till the very end, is because it's that fear. It's not the fear of hell or the fear of it. I didn't really believe in that stuff seriously, but it was just a fear of, okay, once this ends, everything's gone. And
death is real. That's the only thing that we can't change, that we can't negotiate, that we can't, make it go away.
Yeah. But one of the first things, that uncle of mine, like, when everything calmed down, he had his fun trolling through the day. It was like late into the night, and me and him and Zamir are talking to him about my dad and, whether we're going to see him again, is he going to come back? This is just a few days after his death. And how I asked him, I was like, how do you find comfort if you don't believe in anything? Like, where do you get the comfort? And then he just looked at me. And so this is the first time I actually heard somebody say something enormously comforting that was completely non-religious and actually scientific. And he just looked at me. He's like, Ali, he's alive through you, right? His genetics, his biology, he's literally alive through you. And that kind of, and yes, it's part metaphorical.
That's beautiful. No. That's actually like rooted in science. It's like half of your genome is from your father.
Yeah, it is. And then I used to think
you are more him than anything else on this planet. You and your siblings.
Right. And I tried to play that down. I'm like, come on, they can't be that profound. I was like, why is that making me feel so good? Like, it shouldn't be making me feel that, because I'm thinking I'm going around, I'm carrying my dad's essence with me everywhere. Like, he's not gone. He's alive through me. And then I would think, I'd go back, I'm like, come on, what are you saying? This is also some weird Deepak Chopra shit. I mean, you're basically, half of you is about 1/20 millionth of what he shot out one night, through his, what it is, And I started thinking about
right. But don't you see things in your child? Like, I definitely see shades of behaviors and expressions and the way their hands look or the feet look, or look at old pictures and be like, oh my god, Rumi looks exactly like that from that side. There's certain things, and so there's that corporeal piece of it. So that's the body, That's the DNA, that's the material. We'll never have the mind. We'll have the genetic, maybe structures of the mind, right? Personality and temperament and stories, right? And experiences together. But we never share that one piece of ourselves with our progeny, which is our spiritual understanding. That you're allowed to have for yourself.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Isn't that true? Like that's cool.
But I mean, that just the idea of, you think that, okay, this person is alive through you. You think that, you think of the overall life cycle, the carbon cycle, that everything does eventually. I mean, that's not as personally comforting, but I think overall there's some really beautiful ideas in nature that are probably just as quote unquote spiritual or transcendental, or way more so than, oh, you'll die and two angels will come and then they will sit on your shoulders and they would say all the shit to you in the grave and they were going to mathematically write down what they're going to send you to heaven or hell.
And it's not just Islam. I mean, there's every culture and religion has come up with some sort of understanding of what happens after death, right? The Egyptians did it. They left these massive monuments to it, and it was complete bullshit, but they were beautiful. That was their understanding. It's like, oh, you're going to need all these amphoras full of stuff to take with you to the afterworld. It's like, dude, you spent how many slaves did you kill to make this pyramid for your afterlife theory? Okay, great.
Oh god, yeah, there's no, you're gonna have a great afterlife after everything you did, especially. But that was so. This is one of the reasons for my career change. So I don't work as a pathologist anymore. Now I work in medical communications, and I made a switch to do what I wanted to do. I was, I think, around 35 when I did that, so it's been over a decade. Well, it's been just about a decade actually, and because it happened because of when I used to do autopsies, it was downstairs. I was, a lot of times I would be kind of alone in the morgue, surrounded by there was bodies everywhere in drawers and everything. And people in my family and friends said, like, aren't you scared? You're alone there at night. And I'm scared of living people. What are the dead people going to do?
More scared, right? Isn't that crazy? Like how we even believe that the dead are somehow creepy.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're the safest humans on the planet.
They are, yeah. But I used to look at these people, and at one point I just started thinking, because I liked medicine, but there are other things. Well, I didn't like medicine. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I did like pathology though, a lot.
Right.
And when I was but there were other things that I wanted to do. If I had a choice of an actual career, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to do all the things I'm doing now. And when I was 35, and I think I was in the morgue at that time, I think it was around 7 p.m. or something. And that's when it actually hit me. I'm like, these bodies come in, they're essentially naked on a steel table, like a cold steel table. They have toe tags, and I don't know, like they're different ages. I don't know if this person's a millionaire. I don't know if he's homeless. I don't know if they're highly educated or uneducated.
None of that matters. Right. None of that matters.
Did they die surrounded by loved ones? Did they die completely alone and depressed? How much money did they have in their bank account? Like absolutely nothing. I was like, this is how we all go. Like all of us go this way. And it doesn't matter. When they asked Woody Allen, how would you like to be remembered? And he's like, I don't care if everybody gets around my grave and pisses on it. Maybe I'll be dead.
Right.
Yeah, he's like,
that's so true.
The dead person who cares?
Right. Yeah. The dead person is the last one to care. They don't have to anymore.
They just don't exist. And
right.
Then I thought, I was like, if I'm ending this way, what am I doing? Why am I doing things that I don't want to do? If I'm so replaceable here. If I died, then this hospital will just kind of have a bake sale for my family, and then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, I'll be replaced by somebody else who's going to do the exact same shit. I was feeling so good. Oh, I diagnosed this rare carcinoma of the lung or something. And somebody else is going to do it. It's not like it's not going to get diagnosed. Right. It's going to get diagnosed. And
pathology is the last place to feel like you discovered anything new.
Well, I mean, right? All of medicine. You're replaceable.
It's interesting.
We are, but what am I doing? I'm not spending the people who can't replace me, right? Who I are my parents. Like, you said, you can never get over the death of a child. Are, my child, my partner, my siblings, my friends. Like, those are the people who I'm going to have an impact on. Then why am I investing 90% of my time and energy in something where I'm going to be replaced if I die? Whereas, all of these other people who will miss me when I die, and I'm spending only like 10% of my time and energy with them.
That's like an interesting pull and push of modern life, right? We do that a
Yeah.
lot, don't we? Like, we spend our energy in things that at the end of the day don't really, when taken from the lens of death, right? Taken from the lens
Yeah.
of what really matters, and mortality, taking mortality into view. I struggle with that, with because now I see children who come into the hospital, and you know, if you know that a child is terminal, for example, you have a bit of time to prepare the parents. There's a wide range of reactions, right? We get parents who are like, depending on how scientifically educated they are, or how health literate you might say, they might be like, yeah, we understand. We don't want them to suffer. We're okay with it. These are, we can talk them through it. And then depending on how far away from that kind of like rational place they are, and how much they believe in like magical, miraculous things happening, because there's this kind of religion also gives you this kind of like focus on me, right? My
Yeah.
personal relationship with God. God has to listen to me. There's something special about me and my child. And if I pray hard enough, he'll come down and save him. And I've seen that, and that watching somebody go through that torture, of believing in God and asking in the most terrible moment of your entire existence for God's mercy, and there not being any sort of mercy available to them, as an atheist, is a really tough place to be at, you know.
Yeah.
And I've had it where it's the middle of the night, we're coding the child, and I'm begging the parent to let them go.
Like coding, as in the child
Right.
is for the general, like the child is crashed and
Has
you're trying
stopped
to resuscitate.
breathing and stopped. Yeah, their heart has stopped and their breathing has stopped. And so we're doing CPR, right? And after like 3 or 4 to 5 rounds of CPR, you get an understanding that as time goes on, the blood is getting more and more acid. There's less and less chance of recovery, right? From the time that you start CPR. And the chances of recovery are small. And the parent is unable to like deal with that, and because there's this hope that God will intervene. And I find those the most difficult ones, because it actually feels unfair, because the presence of God then actually keeps people from dealing with the reality of death, right?
Yeah.
Because then they keep saying that they have false hope and God intervening, and if they just pray hard enough. And so it actually kind of puts up a barrier in front of them to be able to clear-headedly be like, okay, in case my child codes, what will I do? What will I be okay with doing, and what will I not be, okay with not doing? We don't get to have that conversation, you know?
Yeah.
And in that way, I think like this whole religion thing, this belief thing, and beliefs around death is also about language. And so a lot of palliative physicians, are very good at that, are good at kind of describing, all right, what are your beliefs about death? And in the hospital, that's literally what we try to do. We try to like speak in the language of the person that, in the language that they understand.
Right.
So that's kind of like the therapeutic piece of it is, if a child dies, when a child dies, one of our goals is to make sure that the parents are able to experience their death in a way that's not traumatic, or more traumatic than it had to be, um, and we try not to add to the suffering. We try to decrease the suffering, right?
Yeah.
Because that's all you can do
So
at
see
that
me,
moment.
you have kids yourself. You've been doing pediatrics for a very long time. When you see when you're in this situation where, you're intensivist too, right? Like you do pediatric
Well, I
intensive
cover the
care.
intensive care unit, but I'm a hospitalist. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you when you see these kids who are in, like terminal, and their parents are around, you have to talk to them. You have to obviously stay objective, right? And this is just a question that everybody's probably
Yeah.
gonna have on their mind. As a mother, and as somebody who can, as somebody who I know to be one of the most empathetic people that I know, being having the ability to put yourself in the, in the position of the parents.
Mhm.
How do you deal with that? How does it get emotional? Is that something you get desensitized to or used to over
Ah,
time? Are there days when you're just so exhausted, you're like, okay, I really feel for this mother, but I do have to get home because I have to, get back to normal life. I mean, it's your job, right? So you have daily things that you have to get to.
yeah, yeah.
This is,
That's a question.
I'm not,
That's
yeah,
a good
I'm
question.
not
Yeah.
being very articulate, but
No, no, no. I get the question. I actually think that it's very relevant to the moment, right? Because there's people who are in healthcare who are dealing with death now, um,
Mhm.
their families, and their patients, in a way that makes this question actually really important. And I do think I have a few angles at which I approach it from. One is like as a medical educator.
Mhm.
Um, so, you and I went through medical education. We had the kind of education we did, which at the time was the best that you know, we could avail of. But there was never any talk of this, right? There was never any talk of um, what do you do with somebody who's dying? What are
Mhm.
they going through? What is their experience? And honestly, even in Western medical education, that's actually not something that's part of the regular curriculum, even
Right.
now, you know? And in America, it's actually even more of a problem because healthcare is supposed to be about fixing, about keeping people alive, you know, despite any cost, right? and
Mhm.
and there is this kind of cultural discomfort with death equaling failure in healthcare, which is a problem. You can't just, because death is a normal part of life, and so equating death with failure is a surefire way of feeling like a failure every single time.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I got into as a medical educator was actually uh, talking about the narratives of medicine, right? Like the stories in medicine. So one of the greatest stories kind of written about this, which has been like, Gisapita by now, which means like it's been overused, by Leo Tolstoy, is the death of Ivan Ilyich.
Mhm.
And he gets into this experience of the dying person, where the dying person knows what's happening to them and
Mhm.
nobody will admit it, and
Yeah.
he gets angry, and he's like, and everybody's like, no, 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 you'll be fine, you'll get better, and da, 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 and all of that, and that like false sense of hope, whereas he's like, I just need somebody to admit that I'm dying. And that story gets at that like failure of language. So when it comes to death and dying in the present day, it's like, if you can even broach the subject and say, I'm here to talk about what's about to happen, and you are going to die, and there's going to be a lot of emotions you feel about that right now, and part of it, and I'm here to walk with you through that, right?
Mhm.
So I think this is the concept that we try to kind of talk about in medicine, which is like, we're not just here to have an interaction with our patients. It's not just like you're a client, I'm a service person provider. It's more like, I'm here to walk alongside you because I can at least clear the way forward for you in some way, so you can see what is coming ahead of you, right? To
Mhm.
see that, yeah, this is completely appropriate. Whatever you're feeling right now, I can give you space to feel it. I can support you through it. I can give you the resources. I can make sure you have family around you. And at the end of the day, it's always been family have been so thankful when that's been done for them. And in our ICU, they'll do things like a kid who's been really, really sick for like 3 months in the ICU. He's a
Mhm.
teenager. We've gotten so attached to him. He knows he's dying. We know he's dying.
Yeah.
They actually moved him and all of his crazy number of IV poles to the other side so he could watch a sunset.
Oh man.
Like it's those kind of things, right? Like
Mhm.
the experiences, if you can make the experience of what's happening something that you can anchor on, because it feels very chaotic at the time, right? It's like gone in a second, feels endless. There's just that chaos narrative around it. Um, if you can give people things to anchor on, like we make handprints and footprints of children, we, cut off a lock of hair, we kind of try to make it a ritual.
Mhm.
And I think that's where religion kind of gives you rituals. And I think that's kind of like the comfort that religion gives you, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, like people want to say the same thing 100 times over, and they want to sit in the same room and hear those comforting words because that's something they can anchor on. There's something comforting about that,
Mhm.
and it may not be belief as much as it is just comfort.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember when we were learning about this and we were training about it. I remember reading distinctly. I don't know which book it was, but when it talked about talking to the loved ones of somebody who's died, it
yeah,
said don't use euphemisms like passed away or anything. Just use the word. They say that
yeah,
they died. Be clear.
yeah,
Like don't
yeah.
be
That's
dramatic.
important. Yeah,
Hmm.
people, like people, um, because and that's what comes up in that Tolstoy story, which is just be honest about what's happening. And honestly, now I can segue into what I experienced with my dad. I really struggled to get that language with him.
Hmm.
I really struggled because I speak my Bangla is not that great,
Hmm.
and so we, even though he was a physician, right? Like he
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Right. And he was like that kind of physician where he treated all of his friends. His friends were, like he's had multiple people who he's stood alongside,
Mhm.
as they were dying and helped them out. So he definitely knew the whole process and what was about to happen. But for some reason, we had a barrier. And I think the only thing that made it okay was I got him to write his stories down.
Mhm.
And that was his way of kind of transmitting to me just what he wanted to say to me, you
Yeah.
know? And every time I think of like all my failures as a daughter or whatever, I'm just like, I go back to that. I just always go back to like, what are the lessons there? And he's left me a lot of things, he's left us a lot of things there. And those were just basically the stories he told us like 100 times all our
Yeah.
lives, right?
Yeah.
And I just really wanted him to tell me that because he was such a great observer of humanity. Like we would be sitting in an airport and he'd be like, "You see that guy and the way he's shuffling? I think he's got this and this and this." I'm like, "What? Like, how do you know
As like a
this?"
diagnosing on the go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so he was just that kind of physician. And so he left that example throughout our lives. And I still wasn't able to have this kind of discussion with him because I think we have this respect barrier, don't we?
Mhm.
In our culture.
We do, and especially with men raised at that time, and I wrote an article about this for the Good Men
Yeah.
Project a while ago about my father. It was the same kind of thing that my father, he never told me I love you. He never told me.
Mm.
He never really hugged me. I don't remember my dad ever hugging me. I remember us
Yeah.
going up and hugging him sometimes, and him kind of flinching.
Mhm.
It wasn't touchy feely. He wasn't very verbally expressive when it came to emotional things. All this other stuff, all the cerebral stuff, he was amazing at.
Yeah.
But when it came to the emotional things, we just didn't have that. But
Yeah.
it was still there. Like it was still there in the sense that if we go to like we would do things together. Whereas with my mom, we would sit down and have these long conversations about things, and she would
Mhm.
connect with us that way. With him, it was just if there was something that we're doing outside work
Mhm.
on or playing a game or playing cricket or something like that, it's
Yeah.
just doing so, or going shopping together,
Yeah.
watching a movie together, things like that. So it was always
Yeah.
action based, doing things
Yeah.
together. And that's kind of what we did um, when he was dying. In his case, I don't think we really registered it because he was diagnosed with really late stage gallbladder cancer where you couldn't do
Mhm.
anything. And me being a physician and my sister being a physician, we started going in, trying to find out all these trials, and like, okay, trying to be the optimist that we can do something. But you know how that stuff goes. It just eventually crashed. So yeah, I don't think I got the kind of communication with him. There was.
Did you get some closure at the time?
I feel like I had closure because I was. I think I was good to him, right? I think generally he was good to me. I mean, he was, he used to beat the shit out of me when I was a little kid. I mean, all those stories. But I was born in the 70s, so I bled a little bit here and there.
Here.
Yeah.
Same here.
So they said, that's fine. But that's not something, like, if it happened now, I'd be like, oh, this is just, abusive father. But yeah, a lot of times, he'd hit me really hard. And most of the times I was being a dick. So I know it's not my fault, and all that stuff. I was a kid, but
I do think that complicates our relationship with our parents, and
it does, yeah.
Of their death, right? And having left religion was a further complication. And so I think the only thing I can kind of say about I tried to be as good as I could, at the time, and do the dutiful daughter thing, and be there. But it was. So when he died, I wasn't there, but he was actively dying last Eid al-Adha, so a little less than a year ago. And we had invited our family over from Canada and from Seattle, and just people who he'd been close to in the US.
You sent me that picture. I think that was a picture.
Yeah. That was kind of like, and we made like T-shirts. Like we actually made it a really interesting occasion, where it wasn't like somber, and it was more about it's Eid, and we had Hajj over there for him, on the TV for him, and we tried to recreate that sense of, like, how Eid feels when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Just like things are happening, there's food happening, there's new clothes, there's money.
You get money. Yeah.
So we just tried to do that, and I think it was from what I had learned at work, which was sitting there and just kind of being somber about it, that kind of enforced, like, oh, I'm like the emotional kind of like, it can shut down our emotions when we assume that the other person only wants to be sad around it. And in a way, what we did was just kind of be like, hey, we're happy to be here with you. Whatever is happening with you, we're just, we're just content. We were just kind of like, he was there in the room while there was a lot of life going on. And the last few months had been where there wasn't a lot of life going on, right?
Yeah. Was he religious when he died, or was he?
He's been religious like throughout his whole life. He's very, it was a very personal religion for him. But he used to go like as many times a day as he could to the mosque. And he definitely believed in like the power of like personal prayer and all of that.
And how do you, I guess when he's dying, he knew that you were an atheist, you were open about it, you used to talk about it.
Yeah. And I think that's what I regret, like not being able to talk to him about. Because here's my conception. I know we're kind of heading into the last 10 minutes or so, but so after
longer if you're up for it. No matter.
Yeah, this
25 years. Yeah. So
give me 5 more minutes. So like after leaving religion, you search for other conceptualizations, right? Conceptualizations that somehow make sense. And one of the conceptualizations was non-dualism. Right? This idea that, everything is one, was something that I've kind of thought about and test out. And I do a lot of meditation and yoga and kind of have gone into that path, of all I can speak to are my experiences. And what I do know is I don't remember what it was like before I was born. Nobody does. And I won't know about anything after I die. This consciousness is not going to be there. So this is the box we get to live in. And that felt true. that felt, because the moment somebody dies, that body becomes, like you said, like one of those bodies that end up in the morgue with a tag on their toes. There's no human being there, right? There's no being there. There's no life there. And so to just kind of like, I wish I had been able to articulate some of that with him, to say that I don't have any fear around death, because it's like I don't have a fear of being born, like we
Yeah.
like it's just one of those kind of things. It's like, why do we have a fear around death? It's because we love this consciousness so much. We love being in this television, this video, of reality, and we're afraid that when it goes away, that nothing takes its place. It's like, we have no idea
Yeah, and
if any,
like there were 13.8 billion years that I wasn't alive, and
right.
I I didn't feel a thing.
You
13.8
didn't, right?
billion. That's when so many things happened. I mean, they discovered oil in the desert, right? And okay, well, I mean, that's just one of the things.
It's just in the last
That's the first thing I
200
thought of
years.
because I saw it in an airplane. Yeah, and then there were dinosaurs. There was the Kennedy assassination.
So many things happen.
Satisfaction came out by the Rolling Stones. There was so much stuff going on, and nobody even cared that I wasn't around.
Right.
They just kept on doing this stuff. Like,
Right.
The Beatles.
So yeah.
And
And unfortunately, sorry to interrupt, but unfortunately I think what happens is death is used as a tool to make people afraid, right? That fear of death. I
yeah,
think religion kind of takes that, encodes it into a language of afterlife, which is hell and heaven, and somebody's going to judge you. And all of a sudden, from that point onwards, the minute you believe that, every one of your actions is about something that nobody knows anything about, right?
yeah,
We've just created a like, what do you call it? Like a ghost, and some sort of ephemeral judgment mechanism of judging people, which isn't real. And that, I think, feels more of an injustice. So it is, you see, here's the thing. It's so difficult to articulate. You and I have known each other for 25 years, and we can kind of get to this place in our conversation, but I don't know that I could have gotten to this place with my dad. And
yeah.
that, I think, is something that bothers me, and I feel as a failure in language on my part.
I wonder how much they processed it, because I think now I'm actually very obsessed with death. I think about it every day, and I don't think about it in a bad way. I think about it in the same way that I did when I was doing all of those autopsies, and I was kind of getting my hands dirty with it and really digging in with all the blood and the fluids and everything, all of my gloves and my gown, and spending hours there with all of these sort of dead bodies.
It makes it very hyper real, right? The
It's
presence
very,
of death.
yeah, it's actually, it is very literal. Like you're putting your hands in, just diving into it.
And can I tell you about something that's relevant to that? There is something in the Yoga Sutras that Patanjali says, which is like, it is astonishing that the human being can actually walk around and live and breathe and talk as if there is no death. Isn't that like,
and that's
right?
the thing. It's everything changed for me. So when I was 35 and I had that, I remember the moment when I thought, okay, this is it. I'm just going to switch around. I'm going to do everything I want to do because this is how we end up. I started processing things differently. I think about death every day in the sense that it motivates me to keep on doing what I'm like. Okay, well, I'm going to die one day. What does this matter? It matters in terms of the kind of arguments I have with people now. I remember the kind of things that used to rile me up when I was younger. Right now, I couldn't care less. I'm like, well, we're going to die anyway. And it's not a nihilistic thing where, I'm going to die, everything is meaningless. It's I'm going to die and everything's going to go away, which is why everything is so meaningful right now. It's the opposite. That is why this really, really matters, because I'm not going to remember.
And it's meaningful and on a different scale.
Yeah.
Right. It's not meaningful in the way of right or wrong. It's meaningful in the way of, am I destroying this relationship that I hold dear just to prove myself right? right? It kind of
Yeah, yeah.
throws that back because it's like, I don't want to be that person. Or am I staying true to the values that I want to embody in the world, and I want my children to watch me embody in the world? And all the times that I fail, it's like that's what brings me back. It's like what matters, you
Mhm.
know? If I die tomorrow, this is all the mothering they're ever gonna get from me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, that kind of thing.
I'm more concerned about I worry more about people around me dying than me dying, because I think, like, if I die, right, then you know what they say. I don't know who said it, but they said death is sort of like stupidity. It really only hurts the people around you, because a person who's the actual stupid person, the dead person, they're not suffering. They don't
No,
care. It's just
they're done
everybody
with
else
their part.
around you that suffers. Yeah.
They're done with their part.
Yeah.
What, you know,
There's
I
a
mean, yeah,
well,
yeah.
I'm gonna bring in there's a comment from Gisela Foster, and she's saying it seems we always look for closure when somebody's dying. We want them to go in peace, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And the best advice I got when my best friend, an alcoholic, died was to treat him as is, meaning just be there. Don't try to help him.
Yeah, I mean, you
It's
know,
kind of what
helping
you were
and
talking about in a way.
fixing, right, right. The people around the person who's dying feel like they should be doing something to help, and that is the one point in which nobody can help, right?
Yeah.
Um, and owning that gives you a peace, gives you an ability to then get to the next level, which is like, what are we doing in this moment, and how are your last moments going to be, and how will I remember you?
Yeah.
I think that becomes that second layer, and I see a lot of, you know, a lot of actually, I think about death every day as well, for this
Mhm.
exact same reason. Is like, you know, COVID has added another layer to it, and we can talk about that. But I think you have to. I think you have to,
Yeah, we will. So
right?
yeah, sorry, I'm interrupting you. But we actually will talk about COVID, because Simi does work. She is a frontline worker. So you are a hero, Simi. I mean that. I don't mean that as a just as a thing. Like, I know I've told you here as a joke. Hey, Simi, you're a hero. Many times in the last quarter century, right?
Well,
Oh,
my
I
15
remembered my segue in the beginning. I was going to say we've known each other for now. We broke up 25 years ago, which means that we're now at a point where we're closer to death, and that's how I was going to start this topic. I totally forgot.
you'll get
So
better.
yeah,
Thank you
so
for saying
uh,
yeah, yeah.
and so Gisela is also saying, she's saying, I am an atheist. I do think about death. I'm not afraid anymore, but frequently I think about all the things I will miss out on. Um,
Yeah.
and so I kind of used to go through that too, but then I realized, Gisela, that it's what I was saying earlier. That for 13.8 billion years until 1975, there's so many things that happened that I did miss out on, and actually some of them were very amazing, and I missed out on them. And I guess I could be peeved about how everybody just kept on doing these things without me there, but I now I think after I die, people will continue to do things, and I'm going to miss out on them. I really want to see what happens in this November election. That's the only thing.
Just keep
Uh,
you alive to November 3rd. Don't die before
yeah,
that, because that
after
would
that,
be
yeah.
um I do think that comment, though, one of the subtexts of that is that the more you think about death, the more it makes you appreciate life, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
And right, right, is that well, that is when I think that awareness of death, when you stand outside and the sun is shining and you look at nature and you look at the abundance of
Mhm.
everything that is available to us, whether it be air, water, you know, green, animals, whatever it is, whatever our reality, it is just such a beautiful reality, right? That I think one of the reasons why we are afraid of death is because it is so gorgeous here, right? I
Mhm.
mean, what other planet is perfectly evolutionarily perfect for us? Like, there's
Yeah,
no other. We are the organisms that belong to this earth, and I think in that place, I think that non-dualism idea, the idea that my molecules are the same as are eventually going to be the molecules in the atmosphere,
mhm.
and that I am created of those molecules, right?
Yeah,
We are all stardust. there is a sense of just circular, like we're not going to, like, we're not cast out in death. Like death is not exile. It's not like we become non-matter or like not part of this creation. We are still part of the creation, right?
Yeah.
And so in that way, there's a great kind of like just like a peace to be had there. It's like, yeah, I'll continue to be part of creation. It's just I'll just continue to be a different part of it.
Yeah.
And we know what we know about consciousness. I know about human consciousness. We're only discovering everything else about the other kinds of, parts of consciousness, and we barely know how to feel about it.
Yeah.
Have you read Annika Harris's book on
Who's?
consciousness? Annika Harris.
No, I haven't, but I want to. Is it good?
Yeah, she says this thing which is like, she's very succinct and kind of puts it down like, how do you say something is conscious? Is the and the way she defines it is, what's it like to be it?
Mhm.
What's it like to be a tree? What's it like to be, there's no such thing as being a chair. There's no experience of being a chair, but what's it like to be a chipmunk?
Yeah.
There's an experience, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Going out and finding things, you're doing things and all of that. So it's just a very kind of, there's not just our kind of consciousness, there's multitudes of consciousness.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
And I get, sometimes because there's this idea of consciousness and there's the idea of having a spirit and a soul. And I mean, having gone through all of everything that we've known, having been in, the science and medicine for so many different decades, I just know that pretty much everything can be explained by neurons, genes, or the DNA, neurotransmitters, hormones. That's it. I mean, you can just, I can take your dopamine levels and move them up or down. And morality is going to change. The way you think about everything is going to change. You can become, take out some sort of serotonin, like from your synapses, and there you go. You're suddenly suicidal, right? Even though you're the happiest person in the world. I give you an extra chromosome, and your IQ is going to drop 30 points. There's so many. Your entire personality and everything, your soul. If I change some of your brain into sponge with mad cow disease, you'll be a different person. If I throw a whole bunch of Lewy bodies in your head, like I'll stop with all the.
Well, that's kind of one of the things we think about is when they go through a traumatic experience and their brain chemistry in some way changes because of the trauma.
Yeah,
their personality changes, and who they are, and what they are, a different being than they would have otherwise been. It's just an interesting thing.
But I actually have, and this is crazy, so I'm very careful about not telling this to a therapist without context, but I actually have a suicide plan. And I've thought of it. Like, if I'm going to go, right, I know exactly what to do. I've researched it, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be the easiest way to go if I ever need to do that. And the reason I have it is because, one of the things about life is that there's always a way out. Like, no matter how bad things get, there's always a way out into that first 13.8 billion years where you never didn't feel anything. You didn't have any sense that you're missing out on anything because you didn't exist. And it was like, you always go back to that state. Like, if things really, really suck. And it helps give you perspective. And that's why, they say that a lot of times when people are suicidal, the night before or a couple of days, once they've made the decision that they are going to kill themselves, they tend to go through this sort of ephemeral sort of euphoria. Yeah. They go meet their friends, they hang out. They don't really have to pay their credit card debt. They don't have to do anything because all their problems are solved. It's done. This is such a strange thing to be talking about, but
it is.
No, but this is what I mean by just the logical extrapolation. Once you start thinking of death as a natural part of life, as something you don't have to be afraid of, because we've seen it so much. We've seen people go through it, and professionally, personally, we're so familiar with it. We know it's going to happen. At one point, you just kind of make sure that everything is kind of taken care of. You're doing all the stuff, you're saying all the stuff you need to on a daily basis, because it could happen anytime. And if you ever get to the point where I just want to open the door and leave, it's for me, and I don't want to. By the way, I don't want to kill
Your
myself.
sister's on there by now, right now. By the way.
Oh, she is. Oh well, sorry, Tara, but she gets it. But
Yeah.
eventually, if it comes to that point, I don't look at people like when Robin Williams killed himself and when he got that diagnosis of Lewy body dementia, the Parkinson's and everything. I get that. I don't find that as a.
Well, we're not the only creatures to do this, to prepare for death. Elephants do it.
Yeah,
right.
Just having the option, the plan, right? There's a backup plan, like that kind of thing. And it makes your life better when you think that. This is I don't know if I'm digging myself into a deeper hole here or not, but when you think of it that way, you're like, okay, listen, if things get really shitty and everything sucks and I'm trapped in a corner, hey, I've always got that way out. And I go back to that first 13.8 billion years when I didn't feel anything. It'll be bliss. It'll be amazing. It's liberating. So when you think that way, that I've got this sort of door open here and I'm not locked in, I'm not trapped, it liberates you from the sense of helplessness when life is shitty, or that sense of like being trapped and I don't have any options. And
it's weird that it's actually empowering because you gain back control. Right. And that's the other thing that religion kind of takes away sometimes, especially the religions in which suicide is taboo. Is that you're afraid. If you're afraid for your soul and suicide's wrong and you don't have that ability to think in that way.
You don't. Yeah, I know.
Right? Like you're kind of. So can we segue to go ahead.
Yeah, let's segue actually anywhere out of this topic right now because this is gonna, if my family is watching,
you did choose death. I mean, holy moly, a big one.
Well, yeah.
But I've been what's really interesting to me is anyway, speaking of the present moment and COVID, I think
let's talk about that. You have the newspaper. Hold up that newspaper, the New York Times. Yeah, bring it up closer.
This is just 100th. And this is not just the whole page. It continues on page 11 too.
Yeah.
And this week's
the cover of the New York Times that has all of the COVID deaths in the U.S. listed, which now should be around 100,000. Wow.
This is not all of them. This is 1,000 of them only.
Mm-hmm.
This is 1,000 of them only, taken from all sorts of sources. And I just thought, I've been reading around all of this that we're not grieving enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the problem, today's Memorial Day in the US. It's the day where we commemorate the people who died in combat, right? There are, service workers, families who are visiting their graves today, and they're the ones who died for their country, and there's some honor there, and they're given a lot of remembrance, and we're very grateful for them because they, fought in Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam or Korea. And I think that's what they were hoping to do with this, which is that this approaches the scale of the people who died in combat. And yet, because they're elderly, because it's happening in a pandemic that's very politicized, because it's happening in hospitals and ICUs and not out on the streets, we're not being bombed. There's no enemy at the gate that we can see. There's just this blindness to it, So I think what they did was very impressive here, which was they told you the person's name, their age, where they lived, and one sentence about them. Mm-hmm. And since we've been talking about death and like what remains and how you want to be remembered and all of that, I just thought they did a really good job. So if you're okay with it, I would like to read a few of these.
Yeah, read a few of them.
Okay. In no order. Alice Cooper Smith first, 87, Kentfield, California, in the first class of girls admitted to the Bronx High School of Science. Wow. How cool is that lady? What kind of, there's just the lives they had. Sterling E. Matthews, 60, Midlothian, Virginia, cancer survivor who served as a deacon. Ellis Marsalis, 85, New Orleans, jazz pianist and patriarch of a family of musicians. Albert Petrocelli, 73, New York City, fire chief who answered the call on 9/11. Muriel M. Going, 92, Cedarburg, Wisconsin, taught her girls sheep's head and canasta. just beautiful, right?
Yeah.
There's just some interesting ones, and some people have also all right. So Mary M. DeSole, 93, Poughkeepsie, New York, member of the Literacy Volunteers of America. You know, John Watson, 73, Philadelphia. Anywhere he went, he took pictures.
Yeah, that's no. It's and this is, you're saying this is 1,000, so this is 1%. Like
1%.
Just
this is 1%.
The entire front page of the New York Times plus 2 inner pages or something.
Yeah, there's 2 massive.
Yeah. What's it been? So you've seen COVID patients.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you seen, and as a pediatrician, right? I mean, this is going to be anecdotal, obviously, but what have you seen that people in the mainstream conversation of this, which you know is completely apeshit, nuts, the politicization of it, what is everybody missing that you have seen in front of you?
So, as you said, I am a pediatrician. I'm not an adult physician. And so I haven't dealt with a majority of the deaths. But what is happening in hospitals is that everything is different. Everything is different. If you have a runaway foster child who's COVID positive, how are you going to protect them from infecting everybody else? You know, how many dozens of people are they going to put into danger because they've run away and they don't know how to protect themselves? You know, we have patients who come in and they have delayed care for they have delayed vaccinations, delayed care for regular childhood problems, a presentation of childhood, an infection that's much worse than it otherwise would have been. So there's a lot of delays of care. There's a lot of fear about it, even when people have it, or they're so afraid to declare that there's actually been a situation in which one of our teams was put into, because the parent didn't declare it. This was in the beginning when we were like, screening for it, like, have you had any symptoms? Before we knew that you were still you were infectious even when asymptomatic. People were afraid to tell you because they're afraid that you're going to turn them away. So what we're seeing right now is we're just kind of sitting on a volcano that's about to erupt of every single other thing that we would have taken care of in these last 4 months that will present much worse, much more severe, and will have its own costs. Okay. Then there's the cost to childhood, right? Like children right now, are in a, there's a higher rates of abuse and domestic violence, higher rates of burns because everybody's in the house, and there's a lot more of like hot water boiling and people doing like cup of noodles. Believe me, cup of noodles is like the biggest like burn risk for children, for toddlers.
Really? But are you seeing more cases of abuse and or even non-abuse injuries with kids coming through?
So there's injuries with kids for sure because of more traffic accidents, and definitely like gunshot wounds. There's a lot more violence and trauma outside, out in the streets. And then the problem with abuse cases is if children don't go to school, their abuse doesn't get reported. So there's probably a higher amount of abuse going on that we know about. Because children are basically in their situations where they're for abusive situations. Yeah.
Terrible.
So that's because I function in one part of the city where it's more of the like homeless and indigent and immigrant population, stuff like that, and foster care kids and stuff like that. So and we know that the effects of COVID are happening much more disproportionately in people who are, you know, in the minorities, Latino communities and all of that. So we're definitely kind of, you know, and the strain of that, the stress of that is basically on the healthcare worker. As a healthcare worker is I hope I don't miss something. And I have to, you know, once you've been in medicine for a few years, you know, you do a job, you kind of get into the routine. You know, the mental load is low, right? Because you've seen everything, you know, enough times where if somebody's giving you a history and physical and, you know, it doesn't sound right, a little alarm bell goes off in your head. Right
Yeah.
now, I've had to really make sure that I am aware that I have cognitive blind spots
Mm-hmm.
and be able to self-examine and so the stress, like, you know, the burden of your mental burden at
Mm-hmm.
work as a clinician is much higher. It's
Yeah.
not, you know, nothing's going to look the same anymore. It's all going to have a little bit of a different flavor to it.
I think, like, I never thought of that when you talk about a foster child. So you're talking about kids who are abused, like you're talking about foster children who are runaways, and if these people they're COVID positive, you know, there's a good chance they'll be asymptomatic and be fine. But there are so many factors that
well, the sheriffs who are gonna
worse.
right, like the sheriffs, you know, LAPD in your general run of the mill, like functioning in a city, you're
Mm.
gonna have thousands of people, you know, infecting each other if we didn't have the lockdown. So back to, I think, you know, wrap it up, like everybody's like, are you pro lockdown or against lockdown? I'm like, I think what we've learned in the hospitals, and actually Atul Gawande wrote a really great article about this, I think last week. It was like the lessons we've learned in the hospitals is that you can prevent transmission. It's just you have to do it with a certain number of, you know how he is. He's like checklists and, you know, be smart about it, have testing, have all of this and everything. You can. It's just we have to now educate 300 million people how to do this. It's not going to happen. And you have a low science literacy in this country anyway. So
Yeah.
it's almost an impossible task to try to get people to have a functioning economy and not propagate the disease.
Yeah. And what's the eventually it gets to a point, and again, you know, this thing is very heavily politicized. You know, some people are saying, okay, no, lockdown. There's other people who are like, you know, we have to open up the economy. Eventually, it gets to a point where the personal harm and even the health related harm of lockdown and people who are laid off or furloughed and they don't have economic resources, and these kids who are trapped in these homes, you know, without school lunches, without anything, and their parents are frustrated and they're beating them up, and there's all of these things going on. Eventually you get to a point where, you know, you have to balance it. And I don't think, I think it's pretty clear that there's no way you can ever reopen an economy, the economy, without at least some level of risk, right?
Yeah.
And the only question is, what level of risk are we willing to accept, and what kind of preparations can we do to minimize that risk? So,
and how do we do it without losing our humanity? Right.
Mhm.
I think the problem that we have is like the people who are advocating for opening up get into the trap of saying that, oh, this is not enough deaths, or compared to this other event, this was not enough deaths. So they're tempted to minimize the impact of death and to reduce our empathy and humanity for the, you know, for the purposes of that argument, which I think is kind of like a false equivalence there.
Yeah, this is the argument I hear all the time about how this is it's in most cases, 80% of cases, 90% of cases are asymptomatic. And I was like, remember, it was like in polio, over 99% of cases are asymptomatic. But we work like crazy to come up with a vaccine and try to eradicate that. You know, because there was the people who it did damage, because the number, the level of how contagious it was and the number of people get infected eventually, when you look at 1% of 50 million, 70 million, 100 million, right? Or it's a massive number. I mean, those are the things I think that a lot of people don't really understand, but I'm pretty impressed that so many people do. But
speaking of the polio vaccine, there's one story about my dad that's really important here, I think.
Yeah.
My dad was all of his stories that he's written, he's a very great kind of observer of human nature, and always had a social justice element to what he was talking about. And one of the things he did when the polio vaccine first came out, I think I was a toddler. And in our building, we had a couple of kids with polio, or who had, it was something that I would have probably gotten. And the polio vaccine came out in Taka, and we were in the medical school in Chittagong, because I was obviously born in a medical school.
They're right from the beginning.
Yeah, right from the beginning. And he took a train. He went to the public health department, and he asked the person for one of the first vials of polio vaccine to come to Bangladesh. He put it in ice in a vacuum flask. He took the train back, and the person gave it to him under condition that make sure you give it to all the other kids too, as much as you can. Wow. And that's always left me with this balance of, yeah, we talk about these big ideas, these big numbers and death and all of that, but you also have to think of the impact of policy at that personal level, on that, impact on one person's life, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's that balance, and I think that's what this memorialization in the New York Times kind of gets at, is it's not just a number. It's not just oh, they're 80 years old and so it's fine if they died. It's more that there was a lot of value that they put into this world that we have lost. And there's no metric for that, right?
Yeah, and I I've talked about this a lot. I think that one of the things that those of us who do or in the scientific profession, the medical profession, one thing we need to do is really we have to tell stories better, right? Because you have this you go on Worldometers or whatever that site is, and it says 100,000 deaths in the U.S. and it's the number, it's 100,000, right? And you can't empathize with a number, but on the other hand, if you have a picture, you're scrolling through your Instagram feed and you see a picture of this girl who's got COVID and she's intubated and she's in really bad shape and she's 4 years old, and I'm like, oh wow, that reminds me of my daughter, and they're asking for donations. She's going to make the millions of people will go and donate money to save this girl, because there's a story there, right? There's a person that you can relate to. It's a humanization of the story. So,
and I think that's what's going to happen, is we're going to get to 6 degrees of separation from COVID. You know? And everybody's going to have somebody that they know, or somebody that they know who knows another person who died of COVID. And that's when I think this society is going to get to a place of understanding what's at stake, and stop being so polarized about it, and not let the narrative be dictated by the political, football kind of.
Yeah, you're also going to need a lot of new political leaders to replace what we have now.
Thank goodness it's an election year.
I mean, it's a big deal. Like here, I was thinking if I was in, we got an email today from from my daughter's daycare supervisor, who's an amazing person. All the teachers there are absolutely amazing, and they said, well, when she comes back, when we reopen and when the government allows us to have the kids back, and we're going to take obviously every precaution, do you want her to come in immediately, or are you going to delay and come later? Because I think a lot of people don't want to send their kids back when it immediately reopens.
And everybody has a different level of risk too, right?
They have it, but this is where the political leadership matters. And I realized if I was in the U.S. and if I was in Georgia or Florida, and the governor said, yeah, daycares are open, everybody send your kids in, and he's like, okay, now fuck no, I'm not sending my kid. I'm going to wait until I feel like it's better, until I have better information. But here in Ontario, where I am, our leader is a conservative who I politically, just completely don't disagree with on most things, Doug Ford. But he has been everybody here has put the politics aside, and he has done such a fantastic job that even most liberals, pretty much everybody I've talked to, is just really full of admiration and respect for him for the way that he's handled it. And he's working with, with Trudeau, who's the prime minister, and he's completely different parties, totally different. They're working together, and we're seeing that. So I realize that when they come out and they say, okay, now we're at the stage we're going to start reopening childcare with these precautions and make sure you do this and that, like they do. They hold these press conferences every day, and I feel a lot comfortable. I feel a lot more comfortable. I'm like, okay, well, our leaders are actually looking out for us,
right?
And I think that makes a really big difference.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to have to recreate, right? We're going to have to recreate in our little interconnected webs of contact some rules, some ground rules of engagement. And I know that certain families have done this too. It's like, oh, we have two households or we're neighbors, and we have an open kind of communication about what level of risk we're taking. And because we're minimizing those risks, we're trusting that our children can play together.
Yeah.
To keep that going. So if people have that ability, but what's missing is that conversation. Again, if you can't have if you can't have your leaders saying, hey, you can get together and do this in a reasonable way. These are the principles you need. And these are just science. There's no political, I'm not being a crazy conservative because I want to push you guys together, and I'm not being a crazy liberal because I want to keep you in lockdown. Without those accusations in the room, if we can just do it on a this is how the virus works, and this is how reality works, that's different.
It's so much bigger.
But we're past that. We're past.
I mean,
that.
you guys
in America,
you guys
we're past that.
President who's he's been doing every day? He's been taking Clorox enemas every day. He said sorry, he's been taking hydroxychloroquine.
Right. It sounds like Clorox enema, hydroxychloroquine. Easy to get mistaken.
He's into both of those things, so I didn't know which one his specific stick was. But so we're going to go into some of the comments here. So Maria Hedri's here saying, I left Islam 10 years ago, but I'm Bori. Bori is a subsect of Ismailism, which is a subsect of Shiaism. It's kind of Shia Islam. I am Bori, and still very close to my family and friends in the community. I have no regrets, except I don't know how my family will deal with the rituals and the burial issues. I think those rituals are important. Do you have anything to say to that, Simi? Or?
I think what I have to say to that is, again, making your wishes known. Write it down somewhere, what you want and what you don't want. Just like if you have somebody you trust that you can talk to, a partner or a sibling who respects who will take care of that, then you go ahead and do that.
Yeah. It also depends where you live, Maria. I mean, if you live in where we are, then you can write down what you want done, and nobody will mess with it. Nobody can really change it. But it really depends where you are. The other thing is, it's okay to I've also left Islam, but I'm still very close to my family and friends, and I still did Eid. And I was having arguments with all these people like, you can't do Eid if you rejected that. I'm like, of course I can. Watch me. I'm doing it.
Where does it say I can't?
No, there are people who are telling me. I said Eid Mubarak, and I told everybody Eid. They're like, oh, wait, you left Islam, so you can't do Eid. You shouldn't be celebrating it, and you can't have your cake and eat it too. And I go, well, yeah, I am eating my gulab jamun and eating it too. I'm doing both.
Which actually makes me wonder if they think being an ex-Muslim is actually like a higher level. Like they're actually like jealous that you can't have your cake and eat it too.
I did more fast than them in Ramadan. They did 30. I did 90. I did 3 every single day. I was fasting between every meal. I did 3 times more rosas than those guys did. So,
oh my God, one of my dad's friends just showed up, Hassan Mahmoud.
Yeah,
and he was an atheist. He was an outspoken atheist, and he used to hold my dad's feet to the fire. I remember that.
Yeah.
So I hope he's read your book.
Yeah, I like and actually, Maria, my book has a lot about this, about being a cultural Muslim in a sense. So as far as the burial issues, like I don't want to. This is one irrational thing where I don't want to be buried. It scares the crap out of me. I don't want to be underground. It's completely irrational. It doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense.
totally.
But that is, when I think of that, I'm like, okay, I'd rather be cremated than buried. Then I start thinking, like, yeah. So that.
Well, it's not you that's going to be cremated or buried, right?
Yeah, I know that, Simi. I know that. I know that's what I'm trying to tell you. But
Okay, here's how I
it
think
makes
about
me understand why people can be irrational, because I can be irrational too. I was like, I don't want to be buried. It helps me
Here's how I
sympathize.
think about it. Here's how I think about it. I look at pictures of Rumi, right? Like he just had
Mhm.
a birthday and we just had like I was looking through all old pictures and I'm like, wow, all the cells in your body are probably not the same as they were, like you've had turnover in all of these different cells. Like your body is not the same.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we are constantly exchanging out this outer sheath,
Mhm.
right? And so once you die and there's no electrical activity, it's just like a piece of meat.
It is
It's
a piece.
like I have as much attachment to it as I have, just like the chicken I eat.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of that, we're going to have Anwar Kokar on later on this show, who's also an MD and he's internist, and we're going to talk about cannibalism, about the ethics of cannibalism. So I'm looking forward to that.
Because that might come into use 2020. I mean,
I'm
that might.
kidding. I'm trying to like just poke him a little bit, but he did wrote it. But yeah,
He did write a book about it, right? Or a story.
yeah, he did write a story. He's a fantastic writer. So we're going to talk to
Yeah.
him. Stony Lonesome is saying Ali looks young for his age. Oh my God. Yeah, above the neck, maybe. And frontal view, but you haven't seen me naked in front of a mirror. You haven't. My partner,
That was wonderful.
she just told me, she's like, because I have so much body hair. She's like, you're shedding all your body hair all over the house. There's all these hairs all over the place, especially now since we don't have a cleaning service that comes in anymore. And that's such an elitist.
When people say that to me about my shedding hair, I'm like, you're welcome.
Yeah,
because that's how you get all the dust bunnies out.
I know. I told her, I was like, well, there's no way she's like, I'm going to remove all your body hair. I'm like, you can't, because once you do that, I mean, that's the only masculine thing about me. Once you do that, I'm going to look like just like a postmenopausal elephant. So, I mean, nothing against postmenopausal.
So Gisela Foster actually said something interesting that you might want to look at. I feel at my death.
Yeah, we had all that. Let me just go in order really quickly. Okay, yeah. Okay, so sorry, I'm selecting all of these. All right. So Stony is also thanking you, Simi, for your service. He's saying my state, South Carolina, has reopened, so now our workers are going to get overburdened with cases because of it.
Yeah. So somebody had mentioned something like moral injury up there, and this crisis that's kind of unfolding in healthcare. We didn't even get at that, but
yeah,
there's a lot there. There's a lot there. That's an entire other episode.
Yeah, that is an entire. Yeah, I think this is a comment you're talking about. This is Maria saying that I think moral injury is also a really good description for a lot of what HCPs are experiencing. A friend of mine had very severe guilt from wondering if she took too long to don her PPE, that's personal protective equipment, before going into a COVID patient's room during a code.
Yeah, yeah, because we are literally teaching each other and ourselves that everything that you've been taught in medical school, which was take care of the other person, put your needs second, we're actually having to go against. So we are doing exactly that. We're delaying care, so we can protect ourselves and the next, and also continue to serve others. And the number of healthcare providers that have died is over 1,000 worldwide, I think. And that's just in the first 4 months. So if you can imagine the crisis that's coming in an already depleted healthcare system, none of this is good for anybody. And then I think what I went to on Gisela was where she said, I feel at my death, I want everybody to do what they need to do. If they need to pray for me, that is fine with me. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah. I used to do that with my dad whenever we used to go to his grave. I used to just touch it and read Surah Fatiha because that's what you're supposed to do, and I thought that's what he would have wanted me to do. And then I stopped. Now I just kind of do what I want to do. I just
do you still talk to him?
sort of in my head. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And like when I go and visit, yeah, then I do. Otherwise, I don't. That thing that my uncle told me after he died, that he's alive through you. His biological genetic essence is literally
Mhm.
you're the manifestation of it. I feel like I'm just, we're kind of the same in a way. So it's
Yeah.
been a very long time. I think with you, it's more recent. What about you? Do you talk to?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that is, adds to my story is that when I left Islam, it really did create a rift in my family. And I think my communication with him, one of the best communications that I had with him was when he was post-surgery and stoned. It was amazing. He got in the car. He just had like cataract surgery or something. He was
Yeah.
like doing, and he's like, this thing you're doing with the narrative medicine, I get it. I really get it. Like, I finally just let my patients talk and they just tell you everything you need to know. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I think for me, like medicine and teaching in medicine and just remaining in this environment, part of me is just like, why was I born into a medical school? And just like, I'm gonna die in a medical school, like, and me, like, I didn't want to even go into medicine for shit's sake,
Yeah. Yeah. But you
but
did, and you're good at it. Uh,
yeah, yeah, it's just I didn't know what I liked about it, and I think what I like about it is the thing that has kind of been beaten out of medicine. So in a way, I feel like I'm one of the kind of people who strives to bring back into medicine the thing that makes it valuable
mhm.
to society, which is you need a thinking, feeling human being. You
Yeah.
don't need a physician who's not gonna make eye contact. My dad and I laughed when one of his ophthalmologists didn't make eye contact with him.
Mhm.
We were just like
Well, an
5 minutes.
ophthalmologist didn't make eye contact. Yeah, that's a oh my god, that's like a TV show. That's like a Seinfeld episode. It's like, why is that
Right.
ophthalmologist looking me in the eye?
I mean, he examined his eye, but he never made a connection with him as a human being by looking him in the eye, saw him as a person. So that's the role I'm gonna hold,
Oh,
It's like medical students and residents, who don't know any different, who haven't experienced medicine differently. Um, it's
yeah.
just an experience, right? And I think what I've maybe have learned, and honestly, my dad had the best death. He did. He was surrounded by people he loved. His
Mhm,
medicines came from like across the globe.
mhm.
Like for 18 months, his chemotherapy, his everything came from Bangladesh because it was too expensive here. But we used the hospital system here, which
Mhm.
we paid for a lot of it out of pocket. And because the medications here were like 8 times more expensive.
Yeah.
And there were people who literally flew things over because I mean that at the end of your life is all what you want, right? Is that there's people to take care of your needs.
Yeah.
Um, and that they'll go to any lengths to do it because you know what? When it was your turn, you did the same thing for them.
Ultimately,
Uh,
this is like what people say. Like, if you talk to, there are all these things that have been written about nurses and physicians and social workers who in ICUs who've been with patients in their last moments, and none of the other stuff mattered. Like, my greatest achievements, all the awards and everything I won at work and promotions,
yeah,
all that mattered at the end was their relationships and who they were with, and the people that they cared about. And most of the
yeah,
regrets were about not spending enough time with them and not giving enough attention to the relationships. And that's
yeah.
eventually what it comes down to. And that's a really big realization that I feel I got. I haven't died before. Not that I know of, but having that's one sort of sense that I got just even by seeing these people who died, reading their files, and what they went
Yeah,
through, is that really nothing else matters except
right.
for your relationships and how you are with people, and how you feel. I
Yeah.
When you asked me about my dad, I think someone was asking, well, I think you asked, did you get closure? And
Mhm.
I just remember that I always treated him very decently, and I
Mhm.
was kind of good to him. I was empathetic to me. I drove him up the wall too, but overall, I'm good with it. Whereas I know other people who lost their parents who felt they didn't treat them well, they didn't talk to them, they were angry with them for many years, they didn't, and they are still haunted with
Yeah.
guilt, decades into the future. It's really strange.
Yeah, a parent's death is an opportunity to let go of all that, and it can be hard to do that.
Okay.
Which brings me to like death and dying in the process of it. Two things. One, right now with COVID,
Hmm.
we can't touch each other, right? Like families can't be in the same room,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're basically FaceTiming families in, and your last words are not to your loved ones, they're to healthcare workers, and this
Mhm.
burden that's happening, out of the 100,000 deaths, 80,000 people maybe died alone.
They died alone.
Strangers,
Yeah.
with strangers and masks,
Yeah.
like
I
there's
heard
that. Like,
one. There was one physician who was talking about this, and he said that when a patient is dying and we know that they're about to die of COVID, he's like, I don't even send they have their phones, but I don't even send my staff in because the staff goes in. Why am I exposing them to a
mm,
risk when I know this patient's going to go anyway? So
that's
a lot
right.
of them, yeah, they die alone without often even healthcare workers around them. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
And
really
that's a pragmatic decision, right? That's a pragmatic decision. And they're not making a wrong decision. That's not a wrong decision from the perspective of like keeping people safe.
yeah.
But it's a really sad way to die,
Mhm.
obviously.
Yeah.
Some of the best ways that I've seen around has been around teenagers. It's been interesting, families that get together and just play music.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those are
just
the
play
things.
music
That's good.
and talk and joke and do what families do,
Mhm.
right? Just make you feel like when is the time that you felt the most like comfortable and happy is
Mhm.
probably when people were just talking around you and you're just listening to things and everybody's being stupid. Somebody says something, you make a joke about somebody, and that's missing,
Yeah.
right? Like that the ability to make it beautiful or meaningful.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of meaningless death right now, and that's going to be a huge issue as a society.
Mhm.
And it's really going to change our. Um, I don't know. Actually the impacts are pretty deep. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure how to phrase that.
Yeah. Sufter's here. Sufter, remember him? He used
Hey,
to hang out with this guy so much, and he was so much fun. And we went to med school with Sufter. He's also one of our
he was
classmates.
my little brother.
Oh, he
He was
was?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally pulled all the pranks on him.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
Made him like wear like a little like something.
Yeah. I think anyway. So yeah, I hope we get to hang out at some point, Sufter.
Yeah, that'd be
Anyway,
great.
so I'm going to go on to some more. So here's a question from this kind of dressing stuff.
Wow.
Camera poker. Yeah.
What's your best
What's your
favorite
favorite
way?
way to die? A quick and bad arrhythmia while asleep, going down in flames in a plane crash, or a devastating illness like metastatic cancer where you're kept comfortable and you can contemplate death or just feel liberated from the concerns of being alive? Well, it's clear what his preference is. It's the last one because that's the one you put the most thought into, Andre. I mean, the most, it's much longer than the other options. Um,
Always a torturous path, Anwar. Always a torturous path. Um, so I think what you're talking about is awareness, right?
mhm,
How aware do you want to be? Some people, when they die quietly in their sleep, are like, "Oh, he went peacefully." And I think when I'm old and kind of everything hurts, and if I happen to be, a quick arrhythmia and I go peacefully, that's great because nobody's pounding on my chest and nobody's taking me to the hospital and no interventions are being done. And physicians do feel this way, right?
mhm,
Physicians are much less likely to want to die in the hospital than they are to die at home because we know that dying in the hospital is, it's messy. It's
mhm,
there's just too many things that can go wrong, um, and it's a dangerous place. So and you don't get to be in your own environment. So I
mhm,
would think probably at the end of my life I wouldn't want to know because I think I would be okay with that.
mm.
I would not wish metastatic cancer on anybody. Um, but if you die
Yeah.
that way, I guess it gives you more time.
Yeah,
dad.
out of these specific choices, I think I would probably choose the metastatic cancer. Um, as long as I could afford somehow to not be a burden on the people around me, you have to take care of me or anything like that. Um, so I actually would prefer to be maybe in a hospital in a
What
place.
did Chris Hitchens do?
Hmm?
What did Hitchens do?
I don't know. I think he died at home. I don't remember. I can't say.
I think so too. That was a terrible way. He had esophageal cancer.
Yeah, he did. That's a terrible one. And it also depends. I mean, some cancers are. This is a terrible thing to say. Some cancers are more preferable than others, right? They are. Like if you have something.
Only 2 physicians would do that.
I mean, they are. I mean, you see if there's a cancer that's really affecting one of your basic functions, like your heartbeat or your breathing, or
I think
your
going to the
respiratory function.
bathroom. I think your ability to
Going
eat,
to the bathroom, ability to eat, like Roger Ebert. Remember Roger Ebert when he was dying? He also wrote a lot, and you sent me some of his stuff when he was dying that he'd written. You sent me the whole book, I think.
He was a great writer. Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah, he was an incredible writer. Incredible. So he had lost. He couldn't eat or drink or anything like that. So some things are.
We used to do a values exercise in one of my classes for med students.
Mhm.
We'd do like put 16 little post-its or index cards in front of them, and they
Yeah.
would write down things like a one column of 4 things that they enjoy doing, 4
Mhm.
people that they love, 4 of their bodily functions, and 4 of their senses. And we'd go around, and everybody'd stand up, and we'd go around silently. This was a silent exercise, and we'd take away cards from people.
Yeah.
And what we'd ask them to do is like look at the cards and go, sit down when you think that life doesn't become meaning. Life ceases to be meaningful. All of his stories that he's
Oops.
written, he's a very like
So sorry, that was the mute became unmuted. But go ahead.
So that's what we would do. We would like go around and take these cards up, and it was a fascinating exercise because every year was different. Every year you got to have a discussion that was slightly different about like what makes life worth living. Oh, why did you stop thinking that life was worth living when I took away this particular card? And it'll be something to do with, you know what, I'm a swimmer. If I can't swim, life's not meaningful anymore to me. So screw that, like people had different ways of thinking about it. Well, obviously they're in their 20s too, and most of them have not had any like life-threatening illnesses to think about. But we really wanted to get into that mindset of like, okay, everybody's going to have a slightly different, playbook. Everybody's going to have a slightly different, um, if somebody loves to sing opera and they can no longer find joy in their life in any other way but to sing opera, it's like, yeah. And you take away their ability to sing opera, you've just destroyed them,
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes. And you've taken away a significant piece of meaning in their life. So,
And that's the thing. I am a little bit of a control freak in this sense. Like I like to have control over my life. I like one of the books I really liked was Jocko Willink, and I met him when he actually spoke at where I work. It was called Extreme Ownership, where even if other people screw up around you, people he's a Navy, he's a SEAL team guy. He's a Navy SEAL. So he said just own it as much as you can because it gives you control. And I want to have that kind of control over my death. And so, when I talk about Kara is like, we have a suicide plan. So when I talk about that suicide plan, it is about that control. So if I am in a position where I know that I'm dealing with a really, really terrible illness, like the ones that you're talking about, and those kinds of things, I want to have that control. And luckily in Canada, it's legal, assisted suicide, which I think is an amazing thing. Melanie is saying,
there's been some success stories around that for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to start wrapping this up now. Really, it's been amazing, but it's been a very long time. So we're going to try to So Melanie's saying,
I have somebody who wants to say hi to you. Is that okay?
Yeah. Please do.
Come here, sit. Say hi. No, come down here. So they can see your face.
Oh, hey, Ruby. How's it going? There he is.
No,
I like the hair.
Okay, thank you. They're always curious about what they wanted, what I'm about. We were talking about death earlier today.
Yeah, we were. Well, yeah, no, we talk about
Oh,
it
with
all
the
the
kids.
time.
We were talking about it with the kids. I was talking about
Well,
it.
nowadays, a lot of people are like Melanie, and this is her comment. She's saying, "Thank you for doing this, Ali and Simi. This topic has been on my mind lately, much on my mind lately, and this conversation has been fascinating." I agree.
Thank you, Melanie.
Right, and okay, sorry. There's more. Oh man. Okay, I'm just gonna go.
We went like 50 minutes over, dude.
Yeah, we did. Who cares? Hey, it's a
Oh.
COVID podcast, so whatever.
There's no sense
I
in
just want to
anyway.
say, Anwar did coin the term moral injury here. He's the first one to use it. There's a couple of quick ones that I'm going to highlight here for about 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll go. What do you guys want your sentence to be? So was that like? Do you mean the last sentence, last words, or?
There's a few here. Have a funeral playlist. I like that.
Yeah, there's.
What's your last sentence? Yeah.
What do you want your last sentence? Actually, you know what? Let's talk about this. Like, what do you want as your, what do they call that thing when they put that phrase on your gravestone?
Oh, your epitaph?
Yeah.
Well, I think that has to do with what do you want to leave behind? And I think what I want to leave behind is that you can be whatever you want to be, right?
Yeah.
Like you can be a badass, and just because your biology teacher doesn't think you know biology, you can still be a doctor. I think it would have to be something along the lines of self-belief, or I'd probably find a quote or something, but something to do with that, something to pass on. Because I think when I look at gravestones, I always look at what they left, and that's the last opportunity you have to use words, you know. And as writers, it's like make it good.
Yeah.
I'll think about it.
I feel like I'd have to have something funny there, and it just, I'd have to. It would be like, yeah, sorry,
like
I farted. Huh?
Like a pun?
It could be. Well, I like puns a lot,
Yes,
but it's just my, you know, one of the funniest things I remember is when my dad visited Karachi. Well, you were there, right? You know, he used to visit sometimes. It wasn't very often, but so he came to Karachi, and someone had died in his extended family, and we went to we went to sort of, you know, you sit with them and condolences and everything. So we're sitting around, and I think I may have told you the story, but all of these sort of old men, you know, again, totally non-expressive emotionally. They don't know how to process emotion, just like what we were saying about our fathers. And so they're just saying the most general, like, stuff that you can think of, the worst cliches, just going around circles, and it kept on going forever. So, you know, one of the guys was just sitting, and they were remembering the guy who just died. This is a funeral.
Oh.
And he's like, you know, such is life, right? So I had my head in my hands, and I'm starting to crack up already. And then another guy goes, it goes. And I was looking at my dad. My dad's looking at me too, and he started smiling. You know, we're trying to hide it's a somber moment. And then the third guy goes, but where it goes, we don't know. And I lost it. I actually had to get up. I was like, I have to go to the bathroom. And I went to the bathroom just so I could laugh it out, because I didn't know what to do.
See, those are the moments your dad really appreciated having a son like you.
Well, there were times, there was stuff that was happening during, even when he died, in the immediate aftermath of, like, you know, when he died, I was, it was the people that I appreciated the most were the people who were making me laugh, even unintentionally. You know, like you have friends who come up and they don't know what to say. They're kind of looking around, and we're going to put their hand on your shoulder. And everybody's voice they're nervous, so their voice is like high pitched, and like, like, you know, like just shit happens. People say that to you, like, after your father dies, right? And I know because they don't know what to say. Like, people don't know what to say. So I recognized it, and I started looking forward to those people a lot more, because the conversations just got too draining. But whenever someone came and said something dumb, it was amazing. I had one of my friends, her father came, and he was religious, and he said, you know, how old was your father when you died? I said he was 63. And he goes, it's a very good age to die because the Prophet died when he was 63. I remember his daughter was completely mortified. She's like, what are you saying? Like, the Prophet died at 63. That's why it's great for everybody to die at 63. So, and then I told her, I was like, I don't mind. At this point, I need all the laughs I can get.
Well, yes, we do have to laugh about death. There's actually a death positive movement. If people are wondering where to go, one of our librarians actually is part of the, I think it's called the Death Society.
Yeah,
something like that here in California.
So Maria's question is about having a funeral playlist. So we don't have time for a full playlist, but what would be one song that you want played at your funeral?
Oh my God.
I already know mine. You know mine, right? Well,
you know which one's mine.
No, I don't.
You're gonna have to play it, so I'm gonna have to die first. So you're gonna have to
play it?
Yeah, play it. Yeah.
No. Which one is
it?
You have to say it.
It's gonna be Jannat, man. What the hell?
Oh, I thought you were gonna. Oh, thank God, Jannat I can do. I thought you were gonna say Wheels of the Bus. Not the kids' Wheels of the Bus. This is one of the first songs that I wrote when I was 13. I was like, oh my God, I'm not doing that. I can't. But yeah, I can do that. Jannat
yeah. You wanna that was a good song. I really like the video you put together for it.
Yeah, I'll put the video link in the description. I totally forgot that. But yeah, that was the first Urdu song that I wrote, right? It's first.
Yeah. Well, the words were really cool because it's very universal. It's a very universally appealing song.
It is, yeah.
Right? Like what were the Kuch Gehre Saaye Hain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And something about like Do Pal Hamare Hain, which is kind of like just about life, right? Like there's just
it's just basically that all of us kind of go through these blips and things like that, but eventually it was sort of an optimistic song.
Well, it was this idea
melancholy.
Yeah, it was called Heaven for the Atheists. Ex-Muslim.
Yeah, well, mine would be Home Sweet Home by Motley Crue. That hasn't changed yet.
Yeah, that's
going to be Yasser Sharif. So I went to school with Yasser. Actually, we were in the same class together, and I really like him. We differ now on. I mean, he's religious and I'm not. But he said, "Do you want to be cremated?" And I said, "Yes, I do."
I don't know about cremation for myself, just because of the energy usage. It's like, what's the big deal? Just bury me. It's like the lowest energy. You go into the earth. You go into the earth. There's something very elemental about it.
Yeah. Someone had asked earlier about an air burial, and I was like, "Oh yeah, totally. I'm down with that too." Let the birds have you. So Yasser's asking, he's like, Simi, why did you leave Islam? Please share your story. So Simi, I'm going to have you on the Secular Jihadists, the other podcast. That's a much bigger scale podcast to come on and actually talk about that, because I really want to know. And we might actually touch on the same topic, because I think a lot of people who are not listening to this will listen to that, and they're going to learn a lot about it. So we'll talk
about it. Novices, we did a lot of talking.
Yeah. So anyway, apart from Anwar and so this guy, why would you guys talk about death? If it happens, it will happen. Let's celebrate life and talk about living and make a difference. I think it's the same thing. Death is a part of life. Vivek Sean, I'm sorry, I don't know if you have a nickname. Sean, I'll call you Sean. Yeah, it is. Death is a part of life. So if you're talking about celebrating life, I don't think, and this is one of the things that we wanted to talk about, as two people who've been very, very close to it and been very closely exposed to death and dealt with it in our careers as well. It really is not something to shy away from. I think that the fear of death largely is because we hide from it and we don't talk about it, and we don't consider it to be a part of life.
Right. That's actually a really powerful statement. Like, if we consider death to be a part of life, then it can be whatever it needs to be, right? Just like any life. You can make it whatever it is, and it doesn't become scary, and it doesn't have power over you. And instead it becomes just part of, like you said, you can have control over it, and you can make it part of your life. That gives me some solace.
Yeah,
definitely does.
Me too.
We've all been thinking about it quite a bit.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up with the last thing again from Maria, because she's like writing really interesting things. She was saying, she was clarifying when she said the sentence, "What do you want your son to be?"
Oh, from the newspaper to describe your life.
So the New York Times things that you read out, where people were, the people who died in their description.
Oh, interesting. You think about it. Give me like 5 seconds.
Oh man, what would I like my sentence to be? So Ali Rizvi, 45, still stands by all his fart jokes. That would be mine. I'm not kidding. It really would be.
That I like to laugh. Simple as that. Just like Ali, one of the first things you did was make me laugh.
I did. Yeah. And somehow it's still working 25 years later.
It's still working. And if you can't laugh, that's what I've noticed about most people who have a great outlook on life. Like as a pediatrician, I have like an insight into families. You go into a room and you feel the tension. You're like, oh my God, there's a lot going on here. And then you go into a room and there's like, people are just joking and pulling tricks on each other. And they have this great, like, just kind of a chill vibe. And you're like, yeah, just keep a chill vibe. Nothing's that serious.
It is. There's always a way out. Okay, I don't want to end on that.
Yeah, so you might as well enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I guess that like to have a good time.
That's right. So anyway, thank you everybody who listened to this. This was a lot of fun.
This is a blast. Thank you so much.
This is something that we do, Simi and I do, even without recording all the time. This is what we're doing, so it kind of felt like that anyway. Probably, yeah. So it was, and stay safe. I know that you're staying safe. I know you're constantly telling me about staying safe. And these COVID. So everybody else out there also stay safe.
We got a lot more, shit stirring to do. So
we do have a lot more shit stirring to do. Stay alive, stay healthy, everyone. And again, this is called Professional Novice. We bring in experts, we bring in professionals, and we ask them to talk about things that are sort of beyond their expertise. The stuff they think about things that they want to talk about that they don't get asked about as much. They don't get a chance to talk about as much. So
yeah. And I have to say, novice. I have to explain it as an educator. Being a novice.
You came up with that for this.
Yeah.
Not the word.
Right. Like I suggested it to you and it kind of clicked, because approaching any topic as a novice is the most open you can be about it, the most curious you can be about it, and that's actually when you learn the most about it, believe it or not. When you move out of that novice state and you actually start to know more about it is when our learning about something kind of like shifts, where we're like, okay, no, I have actual definite ideas about this. I no longer want to know more. So I do think that in the midst of chaos, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a world that's changing, the best thing we can do is approach life as a novice, which is what's new, what can I learn, how can I pivot, and how can I survive, right? So learning is the only thing that we can do here, and remain open to new ideas.
Yes, yeah, like you should be hosting this podcast, actually. I should be the guest. Yeah. Great job.
Always seen you.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna plagiarize you again, like I have so many times.
That's great. It's free. Words
actually,
are free.
I literally, like the word. Speaking of death, the letter D. I used to make the circle first and then the stick when I used to write it. This is back in the day when we used to do handwriting.
Yeah.
But then you used to draw the stick first, and then you used to do the circle afterwards. And I started doing that because I liked the way it looked when you did it. And since then, I've been making all my Ds that way.
And I can't take credit for it.
Yeah.
Because I got it from somebody else.
Well, that's
I got it.
Life, right?
I got it from Mario, who was my first boyfriend.
Oh, Jesus fucking. Okay. All right. That's it. We're done. That was your
He's
first. Devastated. Just devastated. It's terrible. I think that's my time to use that last option, right? That door that's open.
Right. This is what you were saving it for.
Killed me right at the end. Right. Okay. On that note, people, on death and dying. This is it.
And ending on a laugh in spite of the topic.
I know. And that's it. Okay, so I'll see you guys next time. We're gonna be doing a lot more of these, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm gonna bring in a lot more interesting people. Hopefully they'll come up to the standard as well, and it'll be fun. So
wonderful. Thank you so much, Ali.
Thank you.
Always a blast.
Yes.
See you next time.
Namaste.
Namaste. Okay, bye.
Stay on. I'm gonna just
stay on.